How's everyone doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiaga, live today on Friday, August 16th, to round out the week with a couple more topics I have today, all regarding the NFL, obviously. But last night we had another preseason game to start off week 2, and that's where we're going to kick off today's show, talking about the performance of Drake Maye in that game, his actual debut in this week, and we're going to talk about it, how well he performed, and what could that mean for the Patriots quarterback situation going forward. Then another preseason story that I wanted to bring up is the coaching position for the Los Angeles Rams. Sean McVay, the actual coach, obviously, will not be coaching in tomorrow's game. It'll actually be the assistant coach getting an opportunity to do that. We're going to go into why Sean McVay wanted to give this opportunity out and what could we see potentially out of Aubrey Pleasant in that game, and more topics coming on today's show. To make sure to stick around to watch all of those. But before I talk about Drake Maye and how well he performed, we're going to talk about an opportunity that I have for you guys. If you've got a question during the show, we want to hear about it. Your input is a big part of what makes this show great, and we always thrive on your energy and insights. So whether it's a quick comment, a thoughtful question, or an opinion that you just have to share, don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. But now, if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to go about that. To go ahead and just use the super chat feature. Just click the $sign at the bottom of the chat box to send in your super chat. This way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content that you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking, hit the super chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. But if you do prefer an alternative, we still have the previous tip and donations link that you could still use at gsmcpodcast.net. So you could use that way to leave a comment or question. But again, ideally, go ahead and use that super chat button. We always appreciate you guys chiming in, giving your guys' opinion, and it makes the show a lot better in my opinion. So remember, use the super chat feature at the bottom of the screen with any question or comment. But that allows me to move on now to the first topic we have on hand. Drake Maye, talking about his performance from last night, kicking off the week 2 of the preseason. Unfortunately, there will be no games on tonight. A lot of them will be played out tomorrow, and then a few more on Sunday to round out this week. But to focus on Drake Maye a little bit more, I count this really as his official debut, just because the first week he only played like about a series, I think, and you can't tell anything at all from that. Honestly, he might as well not have been out there, honestly, for the first week. Yeah, you get something out of the 3 or 4 plays that I think he had, but really I was pretty let down from what I saw week 1. But now in week 2, we got him for 2 quarters this time, and I think fans were waiting for a performance like this. Nothing too crazy. We're still in the preseason, right? But it does have some weight it carries, because obviously this is the kid's first time in NFL action against grown men and things like that. And you don't know how he's going to react, how he's going to decipher everything, how he's going to analyze everything in the game. And picking up the speed of the game is obviously huge. But I thought he did all right. I think also I thought he did pretty well. And I think most fans were pretty encouraged with what they saw out of Drake Maye. Again, the stats weren't too crazy, just 6 for 11, 447 yards. But he did have that read option touchdown that he had, very well executed, scoring his first touchdown in an NFL level game. So that was great to see, and it was also great to see a little bit more of a uplifting performance from a Patriots quarterback, because Jacoby Brissett did start the game, but he didn't do too well, let's say. He was 3 for 7 with 17 yards. He also threw an interception in the end zone, so not the greatest of start, and I think fans not only wanted to see Drake Maye, but to see him go out there and, uplift the team a little more, score that touchdown in response to a pretty rough start. I thought that was great to see out of Drake Maye for the overall game. And I think afterwards, Jerod Mayo sort of shared the same excitement and just joy out of watching Drake Maye. He said that was always the plan, first of all, to kind of plan him out, have him play a little bit the first week, and increase his playing time over the course of each preseason game. He has been showing a lot of what he showed yesterday in practice, which was a great sign because coaches have been impressed so far with his ability to process what he's seeing out there, the accuracy, going through reads and everything like that, and seeing what's open at a very quick rate, obviously much faster than in college. He's been doing that pretty well, and to me he seemed just overall very comfortable out there. He seemed like there wasn't any problems with his mechanics or his footwork. There was a very good throw that he had. I want to say it might have been on that first drive or just a little bit after where, he kind of shifted his weight around. He moved up into the pocket and made a throw downfield to Javon Baker, but unfortunately he dropped it. But it looks a lot harder than it looks in the way I'm describing it, right? To maneuver your way through the pocket. That's something that a lot of rookies often struggle with, maneuvering through that level of pressure right in their face, especially even in the preseason. Not what you're going to get in the regular season game, but still also a level above what you saw in college. So I was pretty encouraged by that. And he seems like the moment isn't too big for him just yet. He could have gone in there a little bit more flustered, a little anxious, if you would. But again, in front of his home crowd, knowing that he's going to play a little bit more. He mentioned it after as well, that he just gained confidence the more and more he was out there. So that's a positive sign as well. And just to add a little bit more fuel to the fire here, if the quarterback situation was anywhere near a question up until this point, I didn't think it was because I thought Jacoby Brissett was going to start regardless. Drake Maye actually said this morning that the quarterback competition actually wasn't over and that we could see Drake Maye a little bit more, get some more first-team reps this upcoming week, or I should say, next week. After, they already played their game, they're going to go through the weekend, and maybe potentially next week we could see Drake Maye have some more first-team reps, which could be very, very positive for Drake Maye if he does really have a chance to push Jacoby Brissett for that starting quarterback job. And to just go off of that, Drake Maye, in an exact quote from what he said actually after the game, he said, "For me, we always talk about competition, and that's at all spots. So even if Drake beats out Jacoby, he earned that role. When he's ready to go, and if he's better than Jacoby, then he'll play, he'll start." And, I feel like that's the general mantra you get, I feel like, from most coaches. They always say the best players will play regardless of anything. So it might not seem like a lot in just that statement, but he said that after the game. Then he doubled down after this morning, saying that the quarterback competition wasn't over. And I think the way also, when you get the pressure from the fans, it does make an impact, I think, because once they kind of get tired of over and over seeing potentially bad quarterback play. I'm not saying that Jacoby's going to be awful just based on the preseason, but if he does happen to struggle, the fan pressure that you get, especially in a state like Massachusetts, in that town, that city, for New England, it's going to be very loud, and there's going to be a lot of pressure, not only to make the quarterback change, but if you're really struggling, I don't want to see it happen. But Drake Maye, being a new head coach, there's always going to be more pressure on him, and it's always going to be easier for teams to just move on from a first-year head coach, a young head coach like Drake Maye. So all of that wrapped into one, I'm sure that will be taken into consideration, even if Drake Maye won't ever admit it. That pressure, if it gets to that point where it is that bad, you're going to have to throw Drake Maye in there. But it is a positive sign just for Maye to have this still be a quarterback competition, like Drake Maye says, because I pretty much thought this as a situation like Sam Darnold and J.J. McCarthy. Yeah, J.J. improved and J.J. impressed in that first game, but still, it felt like Sam Darnold was going to be the starting quarterback, and that's the kind of vibe I was getting from this situation. But perhaps we could have, a late quarterback competition here brewing. And now when you head into the third preseason week, I'll be interested to see if Drake Maye does start that game, just for the reason that Jacoby might be sat if they really are going with him to be the starter. But with that comes the opportunity for Drake Maye, to start potentially along the starting offensive line if Drake Maye decides to play them. And then you have that risk or that opportunity, if you're Drake Maye, to go out there and absolutely ball out and impress even more from this week. Now you're stacking up great performances, albeit again in the preseason, but it does give this team something to think about when you go back-to-back weeks impressing. Hopefully he does it. And now there's some rumblings, there's some rumors going around. Oh, maybe Drake Maye should start. Maybe the talent that this kid has supersedes the guarantees, the safer option you have with Jacoby Brissett, because you pretty much know what you're going to get from Brissett, but with Drake Maye, there's still that untapped potential that is exciting, even so early in this process where you don't think the Patriots are going to be that great, even with either quarterback. But when you kind of know you're down there, there's no real excitement for contention in any sort of playoff or championship sort of way. The excitement you get just from watching a potential generational type quarterback playing in there in his early stages, I think that also does play a part in the decision to make this quarterback move. But overall, I say all of that just to say in the end that I feel like Jacoby's going to start in their first week just because it is against the Cincinnati Bengals, and you don't want to just, worst case scenario, you throw Drake Maye out there and it goes really bad for him. That's the last thing you want. So for me, still going the conservative route. You throw Jacoby out there, you throw the veteran out there, kind of knowing what you're going to expect. He played for the Cleveland Browns, so he is familiar with that opponent. To throw him out there, have a safe option, and with that, then you play it off by ear. You know, you go week by week and see what happens, what the developments are, and maybe it becomes a quick change from week 1 to like week 4 or something like that, or Jacoby holds on to it, and I think there's no real detriment too much to Drake Maye by having him wait a little longer. I think it'll only help him, really, at the end of the day. So it's great to see Drake Maye. This is kind of what I wanted to see in that first week, but we didn't get it. Now that he did in the second week, it's going to go better for him. I truly believe that. He surprised me a little bit. I didn't think it was going to go this well for him, that he was going to look this comfortable, but you know, I like being proven wrong, and I hope he continues this going into the third week of preseason now that their week ended early already. But that is the situation currently with the Patriots and what they're going through, I guess, at the quarterback spot so far. But now we're going to move on to the first break of the show, but don't go anywhere. We have a lot more to talk about, starting off with Sean McVay not coaching in tomorrow's preseason game. He's going to give those responsibilities to his assistant coach, Aubrey Pleasant. Find out why Sean McVay's doing this and what this could mean going forward, maybe for the preseason, and maybe if other NFL teams across the league should start doing this for the opportunity to give to those assistant coaches. All of that coming up right after this break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are jumping right back into the action after that short break, and we're going to talk some more preseason here in one of the games tomorrow regarding the Los Angeles Rams. And in that game, we're not going to see so much of Sean McVay on the sideline like we saw last week when he had the broadcasting headset on, and he provided some very entertaining, very funny, and interesting commentary on the sidelines, talking to the guys, talking to some refs, and just going through living what he sees out there on the field, which was pretty great. But now in week 2, Sean McVay will not be on the sideline after he announced yesterday that his assistant, the Rams assistant head coach and pass game coordinator, Aubrey Pleasant, will step in as the head coach for their game tomorrow against the Los Angeles Chargers. And Sean McVay also said that he's not going to be on the sideline, but he'll spend some time of that game up in the broadcast booth. So we're going to get some more input from Sean McVay after the first week went so well. He's going to be up there again for some portion of the game as well. I'm sure talking about Aubrey Pleasant, how he's doing and things like that. But, on this decision, Sean McVay pretty much just called it a great opportunity for Aubrey Pleasant. He wanted to give him some reps in this simulated, sort of controlled environment, as much as an NFL game can be, for Aubrey Pleasant to get those head coaching reps, that experience on a game day, as if he was the actual head coach. And Aubrey Pleasant, if you don't know too much about him, this is his 12th season as an NFL assistant. This is his 6th with the Los Angeles Rams in 2 different stints with the Rams. So he's pretty familiar with it. He has probably a good reputation, good relationship with Sean McVay. So I assume, obviously, that Sean has a good amount of confidence in Aubrey Pleasant. And I think overall, just to provide this segment on here for you guys, just to get your guys' opinion on what your thoughts are around this whole situation. It's something that I don't know if I've ever seen it too much. You get the typical situations where you get the head coach relinquishing, play calling duties to some of these guys, but they're obviously still the head coach. I don't think I've ever seen really a head coach preseason, and definitely not the regular season, give up the entire role to see, one of his trusted assistants take command. And I'm liking it. I'm really a fan of it. I think this is something that more teams should do. It's a great gesture by Sean McVay to provide, that game day experience as much as you can in a situation where technically there are no real consequences because there's no win-loss records, obviously. So if there's ever an opportunity to do it, this would be the perfect example to go ahead and try it out. Aubrey Pleasant now gets his opportunity to be a leader, be that leader among guys in that locker room, give his insight, give some guys a different way of coaching perhaps, and implement some of his ideas and try things out. And it's all going to go as it does. No one's expecting, the Rams to go out there and expecting them to win. That's besides the point. The fact that he's giving, Sean McVay's giving this opportunity to Aubrey Pleasant, I think is awesome just to see it. And I think it'll bring more people in to see this, how this experiment sort of gets played out. And this isn't something too strange, honestly, for Sean McVay to do things like this. Unusual, I guess you could say, for even the preseason as far as that goes, because he became the first head coach to sit nearly all of his starters in every preseason game. And now you might be wondering, what does that have to do with the coach? Well, Sean McVay, you have him sit almost all of his starters in every preseason game already, and now he's sort of relinquishing the head coaching duties to somebody else, somebody that he trusts, obviously, but it isn't him on the sidelines. He's not going to be out on there giving his input and sort of running the show from behind the scenes. He's going to be up in the booth. Maybe he might spend some time down there, but it seems like Aubrey Pleasant, he wants to give the full control almost as much as he can to Aubrey Pleasant to give him this opportunity. And those things connect just because it leads you down this path that I'm going to provide the question a little bit later, but it leads you down this path where you're looking at Sean McVay, you're like, all right, you're not going to play your starters, already not the typical way of going about the preseason, and now you're not even going to be on the preseason, or you're not going to be on the sidelines for another preseason game. It is a little bit odd the way that it goes about, handling these situations in the preseason for Sean McVay. And to go about that, and also, according to some reports that follow the Rams or are closer to the Rams in their practices and in training camp, they say that it seems like Sean McVay, almost values the joint practices a lot more than preseason games. And that's where he wants to get his starters out there in a practice against a different opponent. And then when you get to the preseason, it seems like he transitions to allowing some of those third team, fourth team players to go out there and really perform on a different stage that's not practice, because it is honestly very hard to go out there and give everybody the necessary reps to, of course, give them an opportunity to make the team, but also if you pretty much have a good understanding of what you have at a certain position and you know that some of these guys more likely than not are not going to make the team, it's hard to still split up those reps and give those guys the opportunity to maybe impress somebody else, sign somewhere else if they're not even getting the playing time, because you're going to give it to some of your starters anyway, like most teams do. The way that Sean McVay sort of splits it up in the preseason, giving the opportunity to third team, fourth team guys, and then in practice, still making sure that your starters are out there against, opposing players and still getting the necessary work that you feel comfortable enough where you are getting better. You don't need to be in a simulated kind of game-like experience in a preseason game where it makes you think of how much really are your starters getting out of a preseason game compared to joint practices. And this is what I brought up, I think last week. I brought this up where I don't think it's crazy to think that joint practices are almost just like a substitute for the preseason games, at least for starters, because Sean McVay is almost going down this route as of, thinking how much does playing your starters in an actual preseason game for about a series, like we saw Drake Maye, or about a quarter or 2 quarters at most for your starters, for your starting quarterback, are you really maximizing how much they're getting better in a preseason game for playing a limited amount of time and then just sitting the rest of the game? Or would you rather play your starters in joint practice, get them the necessary reps that they need against, again, opposing players? You get that in a very controlled environment where you're just repping it out. It's not game-like, but also it is a situation where there's a lot of competition, obviously, because you're playing different players on different teams. So to me, when you line it up like that, I kind of like what Sean McVay's doing here in the way that he splits it up, because, again, you can't get everybody the necessary amount of attention out there to practice, get better, and then that way earn themselves an opportunity elsewhere if you know that they're not going to make your team at the end of the day. To split it up like this and not have your starters play necessarily at all in the preseason does look a little bit weird, and it is unorthodox, but I don't hate it. It seems like Sean McVay just views the preseason more as of a chance to get these third, fourth team guys out there, to get more reps for them, and then also in a real game-like experience for those guys going out there and seeing what it is like playing in front of a crowd, with the rules, obviously, with the refs out there. It benefits these other guys, again, that won't maybe have a spot on your team, like the undrafted guys, the late-round guys, some of these just young guys in general that you might have just picked up along the way. You know that they're probably not going to make your team, but they need these opportunities now to hopefully have a career at some point, some aspect in the NFL. And I think Sean McVay has this macro view of it all where going away from the typical, all right, in the first preseason game, we're going to play our starters about a series or two. Then in the second one, we're going to ramp it up to a quarter. Then maybe in the third preseason game, if you're lucky, the starters will be out there, but most of them are sitting anyway. And that's when you still get these guys playing, but they're only limited to one game, and that doesn't seem too fair. I like the way that Sean McVay kind of has it split up. I'm a fan of it, even going as far as, giving this opportunity to his coach, where it all just falls under the same umbrella, where the preseason is not looked at upon as really a chance to really impact, I think, too much of what we're going to get out there on Sundays when the regular season starts. Yeah, it's a way to go out there and knock off some rust, but again, I kind of question it just when some of these head coaches are not really fully taking advantage of it with their starters and only playing them a series or a quarter or anything like that, and then they're just sitting there. It almost negates the purpose at some point. Of course, you don't want to get them hurt, but I think there's a better way of going about it, and the changes already to the preseason, the questions, the criticism around the preseason have already been there, and it's not like what Sean McVay is doing now is going to spark this revolution around the preseason and changing it now because Sean McVay is doing it. Changes seem to have already been on their way to this. There was that proposal from the NFLPA to kind of shift the offseason and its structure. So I think the NFL was already kind of going this way, and I don't want them to take away the preseason because, again, I think it's important for these undrafted guys, these just young, late-round draft picks, to get an opportunity to at least show and surprise some people. But the changes to the preseason have already kind of been lined up. You know, you had Roger Goodell talking about it, how he doesn't necessarily view the preseason as a necessity. He'd rather have 2 preseason games or even 1 preseason game and have more regular season level competition out there. But this is a different way of going about it. I just wanted to throw it out there to you guys to see what your guys' thoughts were on it. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you think is it unnecessary by Sean McVay to do this? Or are you on my side? Do you like it? Giving a guy like Aubrey Pleasant this opportunity, something that you can't find anywhere else. So it's great for Aubrey Pleasant. I'm sure I'll probably check it out to see how he does, how he's coaching, things like that. It's a great opportunity, just gesture from Sean McVay. I'm a big fan of it, so I wanted to kind of shed some light on it and just my thoughts on it as well. But that'll be it for that segment. We have a couple more to get to on today's show. We're going to talk about Jason Kelce, not a potential coming out of retirement sort of thing, just reflecting on the 2023 season and the collapse, obviously, that the Eagles suffered in the second half of the year. He's going to kind of shine a light on it and where he saw some of the flaws pop up. Then we're going to continue our series of some of the biggest questions remaining for the AFC West teams this time, and some more topics towards the end as well. So stick around. There's a lot more to come on today's show. We'll be right back.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to bring you guys this other segment on Jason Kelce regarding the Philadelphia Eagles. Again, not coming out of retirement. Jason Kelce seems pretty happy, retired from the NFL, even though it must be hard to retire and then see your team get Saquon Barkley. I would be very upset by that. But regardless, I thought this was interesting just because Jason Kelce spoke to the AP's Rob Maddie about the reasonings behind Philadelphia's collapse from last year. You know, obviously ended up being his last year, and it seemed to be getting off to a great start at 10-1, but then they go on a bad losing streak at the end, and then they finish 11-6. They're still, you know, you look at an 11-6 team, you think, all right, they're doing pretty well. They're still going to be a high seed in the playoffs going into, obviously, the playoffs. Yeah, they crash out of winning that division title, and now they have to travel and go play the Buccaneers on the road. But in general, if you just look at an 11-6 team, you think, oh, that's not too bad. They've had a pretty decent season. But, you know, it all culminated in that game against the Tampa Bay Bucks where you saw really all of their deficiencies sort of pop up at once. You know, the offense showed, you know, the miscommunications, the sloppiness in that game, and just really having a struggle to get anything going at all at any point in that game in response to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, or even just getting anything going themselves. You saw the struggles that they had on that side of the ball, and then on the other side, you saw, again, some more miscommunication, some bad alignments, just a lack of discipline on the defensive side of the ball. And the Bucks, as soon as they picked up just a little bit of momentum, they ran away with it there towards the end, and it just wasn't a good look for this Eagles team that, regardless of getting Saquon Barkley, they obviously did now, but if they never did, this was still looked at as a team very talented, very well coached, at least it seems from the outside. If you look at Nick Sirianni and his track record, almost always in the playoffs and having success in the regular season and getting there, you'd think that there's almost no problem with this team. But obviously something happened, and to point a finger on it, everybody could speculate as much as they want until you kind of get an answer, and that's exactly kind of what we got here from Jason Kelce when he mentioned it, when he talked about one of the points that stood out to him was about the just overall cohesion of this group and how it wasn't really there at all compared to 2022 when they obviously made it to the Super Bowl. He mentioned that right away as one of the main points, the cohesion, you could say the camaraderie among this team. And when I say team, I don't even just mean all the players. I'm going to sort of allude here to the fact that I think it means everybody, the coaches as well, and that the cohesion with everybody, the relationships with the coaches, the players, some of the staff members as well, wasn't all there from just a year ago as well. And he also points to the loss of those coordinators, some of the missing pieces that he said in his statement that were some of the reasons why it all kind of didn't play out. Losing a offensive coordinator like Shane Steichen, he gets the job for the Indianapolis Colts, and also Jonathan Gannon gets the Arizona Cardinals head coaching job, and now you have new guys coming in, but it obviously didn't work out ideally as the Eagles wanted it to. But then Jason Kelce got more into this statement about just overall more specific idea of where the issues lied overall with this team, and I thought it was really interesting the way that he put it by saying, on offense, we were simpler, and on defense, we went the opposite way. We completely overhauled our defensive coordinator and system, and you kind of saw the downsides of both of those. Offensively, I think everybody would agree that we probably went too simple, and that got a little bit predictable, and it could put us in situations that were probably harder to execute in, and I thought that was pretty fascinating, just the way that he stated the entire phrase there, but also how he described the offense. Obviously, being an offensive side of the ball player, he gets a good feel of everything and how they've progressed, or I guess in this case, digressed from 2022 to 2023. And it says a lot when I think Jason Kelce points it out like this, just because the offense, in his words, became too simple at times and they became very predictable. And once you see it, once you go back and look at it, and some of the plays that they have were just, nobody really getting open, because one, you could point to the fact that maybe just the play calling wasn't there, so nobody could really get open. But you think about it a little bit more, and maybe the reason why they weren't getting open is because the system hasn't really evolved ever since, Nick Sirianni got there potentially, or they just didn't see it as a situation where they needed to change too much, because in 2022, they had a good year. They made it to the Super Bowl. So, in a way, why change something that isn't necessarily broken? But I think one of the biggest things with the NFL is that, even the greatest coaches, the greatest offenses, it sounds a little cliche when you say it, but there's always something to improve upon just year to year. And it seems, just to me, my interpretation of what Jason Kelce's saying is that, at least on the offensive side of the ball, they might have gotten too complacent, in the sense that, all right, they made it to the Super Bowl, our offense was virtually unstoppable, we might not need to change anything heading into 2023, and they were being shown the results off of that strategy. They started 10-1, but once you get to the playoffs, like everybody says, the playoffs are a different animal, they're a different sort of feeling that you get. Everybody, I don't even know how to describe it, obviously, not being in the playoffs, but just trying to put my finger on it, like everything slows down, everything just becomes a bit more calculated, and, it seems like everybody has a better game plan for their opponents in the playoffs, and that's where, being a little lackluster, being complacent on the offensive side of the ball, not finding any new wrinkles or any surprises that you can throw in there, really comes back and bites you in those situations, because you're uber preparing for the opponents that you're playing in the playoffs, because you know that your season is riding on the line. So if you're not throwing, any surprises out there, you're basically running the same thing, you're not evolving over the year, not to mention just over the course of the season, but from year to year, if you really haven't changed anything and you've become even easier to game plan around, it definitely shows in the playoffs, and that's exactly what happened for the Eagles. But Jason Kelce also mentioned that their execution wasn't there either, but he believes that now they are in a better spot in terms of who they have on each side, calling the plays on the offensive side and the defensive side, talking about bringing in Kellen Moore, and also Vic Fangio, pretty much saying that he's a fan of both of those guys. And I think most people are, and most people believe that bringing in a guy, first off with Vic Fangio, I think just from last year, initially starting with Sean Desai and then seeing the struggles that he faced, not having, necessarily too much experience as a defensive coordinator, and then thinking that it was going to be a smooth transition just from going from him, bringing in Matt Patricia, having him call the plays now, and trying to implement his system into this team halfway through the year was never going to work. One, because already that's a hard task to do, but with this Eagles team, they suffered a good amount of injuries last year, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So not only did you have a new system coming in, but also you had a rotation of new players coming in, trying to find their footing in this defense, in this team, and with it already not going great, you're trying to learn a new system on top of that. Those two things could never go together. They should never go together. And, for the Eagles to come in there and try to, they were desperate. I do acknowledge the fact that you have to try and find a solution, but realistically, with a calm sense of everything and a calm judgment, you would have probably never gone down that route if you had a choice to, thinking back on it now, looking back on that season. But again, you do things just to find some sort of breakthrough in anything when things start to go bad, but realistically, it was probably never the best option to go down that way. And offensively, you go from Brian Johnson thinking that he's going to call the plays, but according to reports, it was always Nick Sirianni, and it was basically his system with just Brian Johnson in the position of offensive coordinator. Then again, when things aren't going well, you sort of move on from Brian Johnson. You still have Nick Sirianni calling the plays, and even though it looks like a change, you're really not changing anything at all. And that's where, going back to that point I made about the cohesion and including the coaches into that, that's where I think you sort of get these reports now after the fact that the relationship with Jalen and Nick Sirianni maybe wasn't great. Maybe they had some friction at times on the sideline just because obviously Jalen is seeing the struggles as the quarterback leading this offense. Obviously, Nick Sirianni sees the struggles as well, but one of the biggest problems that you face, I think, in terms of some of the coaches that separates the good ones, the great ones from, like the elite ones, is the fact that a lot of play callers are very much married to their systems. They'll do anything except change the way that they do things or change the way their offense is run in any sort of capacity at all. And I think that stubbornness to do that, the unwillingness to try and adapt and acknowledge the fact that, all right, maybe this might be a little outdated, or maybe somebody needs to come in here and give me some input on how maybe I could change this, and then that way it'll be the best for our football team. It looked like that was the main reason why sort of Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts clashed last year, because of the reluctancy from Nick Sirianni or just his offense really to change in any sort of way. And you get the struggles, you get the frustration, and then it all just ends up spilling out at some point or another. But I just thought it was fascinating seeing it from Jason Kelce, a guy that I feel like tries to keep everything as it should, keeping it in-house, keeping it all pretty positive. But for him to say this, pretty revealing for his standards. I think it definitely holds a lot of weight. And now you head into this year, and they've done a great thing by, bringing in Kellen Moore, bringing in Vic Fangio, that experience on the defensive side of the ball, bringing in guys like Devin White, CJ back, and along those lines, bringing in Bryce Huff as well. You definitely got better. You're drafting some of the young corners too. You add that plus the experience of Vic Fangio, that'll definitely help. And then on the offensive side of the ball is where it matters most. You finally get Nick Sirianni to almost be the bigger man, take a CEO-like approach like it was mentioned before, and relinquished the play calling abilities to Kellen Moore, and now we should see a little bit more of that evolution, some more changes to this Eagles offense from last year, now heading into 2024, because Kellen Moore does have a good reputation, I think, of just being the offensive coordinator, pretty much having almost all success in every situation he's been in, except maybe the Los Angeles Chargers, but they had other issues to worry about. In a situation now with the Eagles not having to worry about lack of talent or anything like that, he's going to have a great chance here to experiment with a lot of things he wants to do and fully execute his offense with the excess amount of talent that they have available to him. So I like that they did that. I think it took a big step to do that and acknowledge that fact. And that's why, for me, at least if I were to do some power rankings or anything like that, the Eagles would be right up there at near the top of my list, probably 2 or 3, I would imagine, just off the top of my head, just because they almost have everything. It's hard to point out one glaring weakness in this Eagles team, and now that they've, kind of mended their errors from last year, I don't see any way that they're not at least close to the position that they were last year, 10-1, or things like that at some point around the same time of year. So it's good, but you also kind of got a little bit more reasoning why things went bad last year, and now you kind of know it and you kind of expect to see those errors be corrected in 2024, and I think it'll probably happen. They're too good not to rebound off of this, because if they don't, it's going to get really bad for Nick Sirianni in particular. I think he's pretty much on the hot seat just because they're not going to move on from anybody else except him. So they better find these changes. I think they will, and they're going to be right in the thick of things overall, is my prediction for the Eagles, if it was surprising in any way. But that'll be that. That's what Jason Kelce had to say on some of the struggles from last year. But we're going to move on. A couple more topics to get to on today's show. We're going to talk about the AFC West and some of their biggest questions that still they have to face heading into the regular season. But also, lastly, the last segment will be just sort of a news roundup, talking about some of the bigger pieces of news that broke over the last couple of days that I didn't get a chance to talk about and I just wanted to highlight in the last segment. So those two are coming up. We'll be right back after this short break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
We are back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to talk about the last installment of our series, the biggest questions remaining across NFL divisions, going through each division and emphasizing some of the biggest questions that each of these teams in said divisions have to face leading into the 2024 season. We've gone through all of them, and now lastly, we're going to talk about the AFC West on today's show, going through all these teams, a couple of them sharing some of the same problems or some of the same questions going into this year. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to bring up the first team here, being the Las Vegas Raiders. The Las Vegas Raiders, pretty much a quarterback battle between Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. So an obvious question, who will it be? Who will be their starting quarterback in 2024? Because this team I think got better just this year, at least on the offensive side of the ball, impacting greatly the success of whichever quarterback decides to start, right? You bring in Brock Bowers. You still have Jacoby Meyer still from a year ago. Devontae Adams, hopefully, in a better spirit just from the way that things ended last year. You hope to make this whole situation a better just environment overall, because you got to keep your best player happy, especially when his position is so dependent on one of these guys to get him the ball. You can't have a situation like last year where you saw it on the Netflix series Receiver, where he got to a point really where he had just had enough. He wanted to just get out of there, where sort of what he was saying in that series. Just wanted to get out of there because he was taking too many hits. And it was just not a good situation at all. But then obviously Antonio Pierce comes in. He sort of changes the attitude and just the environment around it all. But still, that's all great. But the quarterback position still remains as the most important on the team, and deciding who will, be that lead guy in 2024 is going to be huge for them. Both of them played in their first preseason game last week. Aiden O'Connell going 7 for 9 for 76 yards, and Gardner Minshew a little bit more impressive, you could say, 6 for 12 for 117 yards and 1 touchdown. And there's positives, I think, with either one of these guys, because you look at Aiden O'Connell, he obviously has the familiarity from last year for the Raiders, that connection already somewhat there with Devontae Adams, so he has that going for him. But overall, you look at Gardner Minshew, and he has, the veteran experience, being in different systems, and having that exposure to being the starter or being the backup and then coming in. Which one would you rather have at this point in their careers? And what's funny about this whole situation, me thinking that it was going to be something that was going to be played out throughout definitely the last preseason week. Antonio Pierce came out actually recently and said that they hope to have a decision, and not even hope, they expect to have a decision on who their starting quarterback will be after this week's preseason game. So I don't know if they play on Sunday or Saturday, but regardless, after this weekend, Antonio Pierce expects to know who the starting quarterback will be and not really focusing too much on the preseason. Now, whether or not he decides to reveal that information next week at some point, he can do that, or he could just keep us in a mystery up until the third preseason game, where we're going to have a good idea of who it'll be, because usually teams decide to rest their starters for that last week. So if it's Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew starting in the last preseason game, you could probably be assured that the other one is probably going to be the starting quarterback if Antonio Pierce doesn't just come out and say it. So a decision is coming earlier than I thought. There is some good with both of them. I'm very interested to see who they go with, and it's going to be huge. It's going to be huge just because you need better results this year to have that faith in this project that Antonio Pierce has going for him with the Las Vegas Raiders. But moving on to the next team to talk about, exact same situation, the Denver Broncos. A little bit different. Ken Bo Nix, pretty much the set backup, I think, at this point. Can he do enough to take that starting job from Jarrett Stidham? It's not too 50-50 like it is with Aiden and Gardner, I don't think. Jarrett Stidham finished the year off as the starter last year, and now Bo Nix, obviously being a rookie this year, you're not going to name him to be the starter right away, at least not typically, unless you have a situation like Jaden Daniels or Caleb, obviously. But with Bo Nix, he's a rookie, yeah, but he is a very experienced player in terms of the amount of football that he has already under his belt. He's, I think, basically the same age as Zach Wilson already. His first year, and I think Zach is in year 4 or something like that at least. So different situations. He does have more of a polished look to him, just going back to his first preseason game, and looking pretty impressive as well. I do have the stats. He went 15 for 21 for 125 yards and that touchdown. As good of a start to your preseason NFL career overall as you can have. So Bo Nix already starting off on the right foot. Sean Payton has come out and, praised him for some of his tendencies, the mechanics, the throwing ability that he has and that he has shown. And just from watching him in some of the clips, he's pretty athletic, more athletic than I gave him credit for initially when, they drafted him, and how I saw this going and being played out throughout the offseason. That surprised me, and just overall his arm, the different throwing angles that we saw in that game as well were a good sight to see from Bo Nix, but that's only the preseason. Can he do enough to take the job from Jarrett Stidham? Jarrett hasn't necessarily been great. I think he threw a pretty wild interception in the first game, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm sure he's going to play more in the next game. I'm sure Bo Nix is going to be out there as well, so we're going to get a better understanding of it after this next preseason game, and I don't think it'll be like the Raiders where they're going to have an answer already. This quarterback battle even though it might be a little bit more set, I think it'll carry on until the third week. And maybe if Bo Nix has another performance like he did in the first week, then it'll put a little bit more pressure on it, and we could have a closer decision come the days after the third week of preseason. So that's where it stands right now. Bo Nix kind of chomping at the bit here a little bit. That competition is certainly open as well. Jarrett Stidham, the presumed starter right now, but don't be surprised if Bo Nix makes it a lot closer after this weekend. But the next team I want to mention is the Kansas City Chiefs. And looking at their wide receiver room, what will the wide receiver room sort of be like, ideally, for the Chiefs team? Just because they've definitely improved on who's in that room, right? Last year, I couldn't name you too many guys that they had. Sky Moore, Mecole Hardman, Rashee Rice were the three main ones that I could bring up. And you saw it in the struggles that they had, that this offense, that Patrick Mahomes didn't have the level of regular season that they typically have. You saw it in the player rankings as well. To have Patrick Mahomes ranked at 4th was pretty surprising, but also you look at the season that he had, and some people could point to the fact that this offense certainly struggled at some points in the regular season, or at least more so than they typically do, for a lack of talent at that receiver spot. But they definitely did a good job of improving that this year, bringing in the guy that you see on your screen, Xavier Worthy, bringing in Marquise Brown, having another year with Rashee Rice after impressing last year. It's looking like a more balanced, well-shaped room. But the issue that I see, getting in the way of this Chiefs team and this wide receiver room is all the other factors that might affect when we see this wide receiver group at its maximum potential. And by that I mean, you look at a guy like Marquise Brown already being a doubt to start in that week one matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. So right off the bat, you might not have one of your main playmakers out there against one of the better teams, a direct rival pretty much in your conference. And then you also look at how quickly Xavier Worthy can sort of become comfortable, find his footing in the NFL, and start to become a real, reliable weapon for Patrick Mahomes, because we're going to see some struggles. We're going to see some learning curves with Xavier Worthy, like we see with everybody, with every other rookie as well. So how quickly Xavier Worthy can do that is another factor where you don't really know when you're going to get the maximum potential out of this group. And also, you can't forget about Rashee Rice, because he still has a presumed, potential suspension coming from the NFL for his part in the car accident that happened over the offseason. A pretty severe one, and, playing a part in it, a pretty big part in it. When is that going to happen? When are they going to announce it? And how long is that going to be? How does that affect his ability to contribute this offseason? You have all those things circulating around this wide receiver room where you don't know at what point, how early, how late, and the level of chemistry that you could have among all these guys at the same time. You just don't know when that moment will come. So that's really where my curiosity lies with the Chiefs. Trying to figure that out will certainly be beneficial, but knowing this Chiefs team, you'd almost be a fool to doubt them in any sort of circumstance. It's just a matter of really when, not if, this wide receiver group gets in rhythm. So we're going to keep an eye out for that. But the last thing I'd mention here just quickly is the Los Angeles Chargers. When will, or how quickly can they get this new offense basically to work? Because they obviously shook up the entire thing this year, getting rid of Keenan Allen. Mike Williams is now also gone. Austin Eckler's gone. And you bring in this new identity with Jim Harbaugh, a run-first offense, prioritizing the offensive line, becoming a lot nastier, a lot meaner, and basing the passing game off of that. The success that you have up front and just how, successful that can be early on for this Chargers team is going to be huge. Already, not off to a great look in the preseason. It is only the preseason, but they only put up 3 points, so that's not going to get anybody too excited for how this new offense can look. But it's how they build. It's how they build on it. Obviously, not having Justin Herbert in there, dealing with the foot injury that he suffered, I think, a couple weeks ago now, isn't great. So trying to integrate him back and improving and implying all of your methods and strategies and schemes into this offense, you want to have your starting quarterback out there. So that's a little bit annoying that they don't have him out there, but to try and improve on that and how quickly we can see the results, because I truly believe with Jim Harbaugh leading this new look Los Angeles Chargers team, I think they're going to have results. I know they're going to be successful. That's how much confidence I have in Jim Harbaugh, but it all depends on how quickly, this gets going here, because if it takes like 4-5 weeks, it's going to get a little hot in Los Angeles, a lot hotter than it already is. You're going to have a lot of pressure coming in, and it's not ideally what you want, but how Jim Harbaugh goes around it and how quickly the players buy in and how quickly they, produce out there, it's going to be huge for them. It's going to be huge, and that's the main question I have for the Chargers, and that pretty much does it for the series overall in this last episode of it, talking about the AFC West teams. Jay, hi, how you doing? Welcome to the show. But that'll wrap it up for that segment. And we have one more to talk about when we return after our next break. Just a quick news roundup on some of the bigger stories that I sort of missed this week. Some pretty big ones in terms of injuries, who's starting this preseason week for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and another signing for the Atlanta Falcons in just the last few days. Those are some of the topics we'll talk about when we return just quickly after this short break. Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's show. Just going over a brief news roundup on some pretty significant news that we got over the last few days that I just didn't get a chance to fully talk about in an entire segment. So I thought I'd throw it all in here and just give my thoughts on some of the bigger ones going into the second preseason weekend here for the NFL. One of the biggest ones is the fact that yesterday, just the day after the Falcons traded for Matthew Judon, they go ahead and sign one of the best remaining free agents left on the market in Justin Simmons to a 1-year, $8 million deal with $7.5 million guaranteed to the now 30-year-old Justin Simmons, but still just as elite as you would want in a free agent acquisition that you get at this point in the year. To get Justin Simmons, a 2-time Pro Bowler, 4-time second-team All-Pro, and just coming off the bat of last year, 70 total tackles, 1 sack, and 3 interceptions, to have him form a duo with Jesse Bates, who last year put up a great campaign for the Atlanta Falcons and their defensive side of the ball, to have both of them now in there, the experience, the knowledge, and just the veteran savviness that you have in your backfield to kind of quarterback everything is going to be huge for this defense that just in a matter of days have gone from looking pretty good, pretty, average looking defense to one of the better ones, I would say, at least in their division. I think for the longest time it has been the Saints with arguably the better defense in that division, but now the Falcons, I think, give them a good run for their money. And across the NFC, they have a lot of experienced guys now on their defense. You look at Grady Jarrett, the 2 safeties, Justin Simmons and Jesse Bates. AJ Terrell is also very good. So they have a guy just about at every spot on the defensive side of the ball that is very formidable, has a good reputation in this league. So Raheem Morris, being a defensive-minded coach, obviously putting some emphasis on that, bringing in some guys to help him right away to have a lot of success this year. And I think it goes along with the expectations that we have for the Falcons. And now the fact that they have Simmons and Judon now on this team just adds to the possibility that this year could be a very impressive one for the Falcons. So in reality, I don't like it, being a Steelers fan, having to face Simmons and Matthew Judon, but as a fan of football, I think this is awesome for the Falcons. It's good for them, and hopefully they capitalize on this now heading into the new year. Now moving on to another significant piece of news here that we got over the last few days. Pretty devastating news for the Buffalo Bills as they announced on Wednesday that their all-pro linebacker Matt Milano will have to go surgery on his torn bicep that he suffered at Tuesday's practice this week. And clearly, after the fact that you lose like Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, Tre'Davious White, all veteran players on that defensive side of the ball, and not just players like on the field, but leaders in that locker room, establishing your culture that you want to transcribe to all of these younger players coming in now, younger players that are going to have to play a big role in 2024. All of those guys are, now gone, and the fact that Matt Milano was still there coming off of I think he suffered a fracture last year. I had it on here. I forget what it was. He suffered a fracture, just a bad, he fractured his leg last year and only played 5 games, but the fact that he was, it was so anticipated that he was going to come back this year, you're going to have that veteran presence in that defensive side of the ball. Now that he has torn his bicep before playing any games is gut-wrenching. It has the air leave your body when you hear news like that. And I'm not a Bills fan or anything like that, but to know that Matt Milano recovered so well, was about to play, and then just to go down with a torn bicep and to go through surgery, he's not expected to come back the earliest by December, so he's going to miss most of the regular season. And regardless of whether or not you want to rush him back by December or anything like that, it's a bad situation overall for this Bills team. And now they're going to have to look to a younger guy like Dorian Williams, a third-round pick just from last year, is the most likely to step up and sort of supplement that role of Matt Milano. And obviously there's no direct replacement in that role for Milano and everything that he brought to this team, but somebody has to do it. Somebody has to fill that void, and they're very young now on that defensive side of the ball. I mean, they still have Von Miller, Ed Oliver, and AJ Epinesa on, the front line. But, once you get past that front, very good defensive line, you have young linebackers now. You have young secondary players, and a lot of the times, a lot of miscommunication happens from that point on the defensive side of the ball, which could lead to some bad looks. Again, like I said, miscommunications, missed assignments, and things like that. And Matt Milano's certainly going to be missed. All those guys are going to be missed. But you kind of had some relief that Milano was at least going to be there. To lose him for basically all of 2024, it stinks. It's really unfortunate for the Bills. But it only really adds... you lose Matt Milano, but the funny thing is it doesn't really take away any pressure from what the Bills are going to face, just because there's always scrutiny and pressure on the shoulders of Josh Allen just because he is in that upper echelon of quarterbacks. So you would think that this would ease off some of the pressure, especially because they moved on from Stephon Diggs as well. But it's funny that, if anything, it's going to be spun in a way where more pressure is going to be on Josh Allen now, because everyone's going to look to him because you have no Matt Milano, you have no Diggs, you have no veteran presence. There's almost more pressure now, and I feel like that's going to be the narrative going forward for Josh Allen. And again, regardless of if it's fair or not, I feel like it's going to be put out there as a narrative, and Josh Allen is going to be pointed to a lot if the Bills are struggling at some point, where you got to really know the entire context and realize that as good as Josh Allen is, it can't all be on him for how much losses this Bills team has gone through. So, unfortunate news again, but the next piece I wanted to talk about was heading into the second preseason game here. Like I mentioned, Russell Wilson is expected to make his Steelers debut tomorrow in their second preseason game against the Bills. Funny enough, Russell Wilson has been a full participant in practice over the last few days, pretty much this entire week, and I think a little bit of last week as well. And now, after they had their joint practice with the Bills on yesterday, again, Russell Wilson played pretty well, and Mike Tomlin spoke to the media afterwards and pretty much confirmed that Russell Wilson will be starting in tomorrow's game along with all the other starters. So it's pretty significant just from that standpoint that we're going to see Russ not only play for the first time in a Steelers uniform in any capacity, but the fact that he is starting goes along with the entire, news that we've heard about him being in the pole position, this still being his job. Mike Tomlin stays true to his word, and he is starting him. And it is pretty, even though that is the fact that Mike Tomlin is still starting him, there is still some urgency that Russell Wilson should show, just because, you missed already a good amount of time. And in that time, you had Justin Fields impressing a lot of people and looking better than I think a lot of people originally expected. I think most people believe that the progression that Justin Fields has shown already wasn't going to come until halfway through the season or something like that, and almost at a point where you had to just start Justin Fields. But now, and he's impressed already enough. And going back to the first preseason game, yeah, it didn't go as you would expect for Justin Fields, but again, I don't put too much stock in those two fumbles. Honestly, I really don't. I feel like a lot of people have run with that narrative of, you see the two fumbled snaps and people right away, jump out of their seats and go, look, that's why Justin Fields shouldn't start. That's exactly the reason why they need Russell Wilson. And it's the preseason game. I know you don't want to see those mistakes happen, but to completely, forget or not even pay attention to how well not Russell Wilson, but Justin Fields looked in the other plays that he had, some of the throws, and just overall how the offense looked. That's what I was really pulling from that game, overall, how the overall offense looked. And to me, there was some signs of growth just from last year to this year in terms of the offense and how it was being run. The fact that he fumbled those two snaps, it wasn't too big of a concern to me. I can't just forget everything I've seen from Justin Fields just for a moment where two snaps were fumbled, where it was his fault, but also the center's fault as well. But Russell Wilson will start. That is pretty much the news for that Steelers game, how he plays with the first team offense, and also how Justin Fields sort of rebounds from the first week of preseason and tries to stack up good performances from week to week will also be huge to continue to have that pressure applied there to Russell Wilson. But those were really the three pieces of news that I wanted to bring you guys here just shortly here to close out this episode, and things that we're going to be looking forward to going into this week with Russell Wilson, and then in the future with how the Bills look and the Falcons as well should be something to keep an eye on as we move on. But that'll pretty much do it. That'll wrap it up for today's show. I want to thank you guys for joining me. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show as well, on top of following the network on all forms of social media. If you want to see more of this show, check out the Podcast Network channel and the Sports Network channel on YouTube for a lot more content around the NFL regarding this show. And lastly, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more storylines around the NFL and discussions on them with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you guys for joining me. Hope you guys all have a great weekend. Check out those preseason games, and I'll see you guys back on here with me on Monday.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great.